Hey there, viewers. Here's something to think about. Do you believe that people show their true selves when they have nothing left to lose? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Today's story is explosive. An inmate has finally broken their silence, revealing what could be Diddy's most shocking prison confession yet. What they exposed might change everything. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Whispered Confession. I never wanted to know. Some things are better left buried, locked away where they can't crawl into your head and keep you up at night. But when you share a cell with a man like Diddy, secrets have a way of finding you. It started like any other night in 1600. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that sickly glow over everything. The air was thick with sweat, the stale scent of bodies crammed together for too long. Diddy was on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, that unreadable expression on his face. He'd been like that all day, silent, withdrawn, not his usual self. I was about to turn over and let sleep take me when he finally spoke. You ever wonder how far people go to keep a secret? His voice was low, almost a whisper. I almost didn't catch it over the distant sound of someone yelling down the hall. I turned my head toward him. Depends on the secret. Diddy chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Just something hollow, like a man laughing at his own funeral. Yeah, he muttered. Depends on the secret. I sat up, watching him. He wasn't looking at me. His eyes were still locked on the ceiling, his fingers tapping in uneven rhythm against his chest. You trying to tell me something? I asked. A long silence stretched between us. Then finally he sighed. There's a place, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Far away, no cameras, no questions, no way in unless you're invited. A chill crawled down my spine. What kind of place? He shook his head. It ain't about the place. It's about what's there. The way he said it made my stomach twist. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to ask, and what's there? For the first time, he looked at me. Really looked at me. His eyes dark, heavy, like they carried the weight of something unbearable. Kids, he said finally. Kids that ain't supposed to exist. My whole body went rigid. The words didn't make sense at first, like my brain refused to put them together in a way that added up. But Diddy wasn't joking. He wasn't playing, and that scared me more than anything. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? He exhaled, long and slow. There are people, he said, choosing his words carefully. People who collect things, and sometimes they collect what shouldn't be collected. I felt sick. You're saying... I ain't saying shit. He cut me off, eyes narrowing. I'm just talking. Talking don't mean nothing. But we both knew that wasn't true. Not in here. Words were everything. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Why are you telling me this? Diddy let out another humorless laugh. Because when they come for me, you're gonna know why. I stared at him, my heartbeat thudding against my ribs. Who's coming for you? But he didn't answer. He just turned over, back to me, as if the conversation never happened. Sleep didn't come for me that night. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light from the hallway sent my nerves on edge. And for the first time since I got locked up, I had the feeling that knowing too much might just get me killed. The next morning, Diddy was different, quieter than usual. His usual cocky smirk was gone, replaced by something else, something haunted. I watched as he picked at his breakfast tray, barely touching the food. The other inmates were talking, laughing, going about their routines like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I kept hearing his words in my head, over and over. Kids that ain't supposed to exist. What the hell did that mean? My gut told me to let it go, to pretend I never heard it, but my mind wouldn't stop turning. After breakfast, we had yard time. Diddy kept his distance, standing by the fence, staring at nothing. I walked up beside him. You all right? He didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at me, he muttered, They watch everything. Every move, every word. I frowned. Who? He turned his head just enough to glance at one of the guards standing near the gate. Them. I followed his gaze. The CO looked normal, bored, half distracted, but Diddy's expression said otherwise, like he saw something the rest of us didn't. I lowered my voice. You're saying the guards are in on it? Diddy gave a slow nod. Some of them, not all, but enough. A shiver ran down my spine. If that was true, then who the hell could you trust in here? That night I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. I kept expecting someone to come, for the door to open, for Diddy to disappear just like he said he would. But nothing happened. Not yet. But something was coming. I could feel it in my bones. Chapter 2. The Unseen Eyes. I didn't speak to Diddy the next morning. I wanted to, but something about the way he carried himself told me not to push it. He was quieter than usual, barely touching his breakfast, eyes darting up every few minutes, like he expected someone to be watching. And maybe someone was. The thought made my stomach twist. I tried to act normal, tried to pretend like the conversation from last night never happened. But I couldn't shake it. The words haunted me. Kids that ain't supposed to exist. I watched Diddy from across the table. He looked like a man walking a tightrope over an open flame, knowing one wrong step meant the end. I wanted to ask him more, to press for details, but then, as if he could feel my thoughts creeping in, he shook his head once. A slow, deliberate movement. A warning. Not here. So I let it go. For now. After breakfast, the routine continued. Yard time. The same cracked pavement, the same chain-link fences topped with razor wire, the same guards standing in their usual spots. But something about them felt different now. Office. I spotted Diddy near the far corner, standing with his back to the fence, eyes scanning the crowd like he was looking for someone, or making sure someone wasn't looking for him. I made my way over, careful not to draw attention. "Talk to me," I muttered under my breath as I leaned against the fence beside him. "What the hell is going on?" He let out a short breath, more exhale than sigh. "You ever feel like someone's watching you?" "Yeah," I glanced around. "Right now." He gave a humorless smirk, shaking his head. "Not like that." "Then how?" Diddy didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted his chin slightly, nodding toward one of the guards near the main gate. At first, the guy looked normal. Just another CO, arms crossed, scanning the yard like they always did. Then I noticed it. He wasn't watching the yard. He was watching Diddy. And not in the usual way a guard watches an inmate. Bored, half distracted. This was something else. This was precise, calculated. It sent a chill up my spine. "They're waiting," Diddy murmured. "For what?" He turned his head slightly, just enough to meet my eyes. "For me to say too much." I swallowed hard. "You think they know?" "I know they do." The air around us felt heavier. The distant sound of inmates talking, the occasional burst of laughter. It all felt distant, like we were in some kind of bubble, separate from the rest of the prison. And I hated it. I took a step away from the fence, forcing a casual stretch like we weren't talking about the kind of thing that could get us both killed. "So what do we do?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Diddy gave me a look, one that said, "We?" "You want to walk away?" I challenged. For a second, I thought he might. But then, something in his expression shifted, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was relief, maybe it was resignation. "They move quiet," he said, his voice so low I had to strain to hear him. "When it happens, it'll happen fast." "What will?" "They'll come." I exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over my face. "You're acting like this is a damn horror movie, man." Diddy smirked. "It is." The yard buzzer rang, signaling the end of our time outside. As we made our way back inside, I felt it again, that weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe I was letting Diddy's words get in my head. Or maybe he was right. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those kids, the ones Diddy had mentioned, the ones that weren't supposed to exist. I didn't know what the hell that meant, but my mind kept painting pictures I didn't want to see. Where were they? Who were they? Why the hell was Diddy talking about them? I turned onto my side, staring at the opposite wall of my cell. Diddy was lying on his bunk, facing away from me, his breathing steady but shallow. Then, just as I started to drift off, he whispered, "They're here." My eyes snapped open. "What?" Silence. I sat up, my pulse kicking up a notch. "Diddy..." "Shh." The way he said it made my blood turn to ice. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the heavy, deliberate steps of a CO doing rounds. Not the lazy shuffle of an inmate getting up to use the toilet. These were different. Smooth. Purposeful. I held my breath as they passed by our cell. Shadows flickered across the floor from the dim hallway lights. I wanted to move, to see who it was, but my body wouldn't listen. I felt frozen in place. The footsteps stopped. Right outside our door, I could feel the presence, even though I couldn't see them. It was like the air itself shifted, like something unnatural was standing on the other side of that metal door. Then, a faint click. Not the clank of a key turning in a lock. Not the slide of a passcode being entered. Just a click. Diddy inhaled sharply, and then the footsteps continued. Gone, just like that. I exhaled, my breath shaky. What the hell? They check, Diddy murmured, his voice barely audible. To see if you're awake. A chill ran down my spine. Who? He didn't answer. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, my heart still pounding. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing. Just paranoia. Just the stress of prison getting to me. But deep down, I knew better. Someone had been there. Someone who wasn't supposed to be. And they weren't done yet. Chapter 3. The Silent Watchers. Sleep didn't come easy after that night. Every sound in the prison, every creak, every distant voice, every shuffle of movement felt different now. Like the walls had ears. Like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. I had been locked up long enough to know when something was off. But this wasn't just paranoia. This was real. Diddy didn't talk much the next morning. He didn't have to. The bags under his eyes said enough. Whatever had happened last night, whatever those footsteps were, it wasn't the first time he'd experienced it, and something told me it wouldn't be the last. I wanted answers, and I needed them. But I also wasn't stupid. The way Diddy carried himself, the way he kept his voice low, his glances quick, told me one thing. Whoever was watching him wasn't just another inmate. They weren't just another CO either. They were something worse. Morning routine, breakfast, the usual sloppy trays of eggs that tasted like rubber and coffee so weak it might as well have been dirty water. I forced myself to eat, even though my stomach felt twisted into knots. Across the table, Diddy picked at his food. He hadn't said a word since we sat down. "You good?" I muttered. He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked up toward the guards posted near the doors, then back down at his tray. "They see everything," he murmured. "Who?" A slow breath. He tapped his fingers against the table. Once, twice. A signal, a warning. The ones who don't wear badges. I frowned. "You mean the suits?" Another breath. Another glance toward the guards. "They ain't suits. They ain't cops. And they sure as hell ain't just COs. I swallowed hard. I wanted to push for more, but I could feel the weight in the air between us. Too many ears, too many unseen eyes. So I let it go. For now. Yard time came, and with it, an opportunity. Diddy and I found our usual corner, away from most of the noise, close to the fence. I kept my hands in my pockets, trying to look casual, but my mind was racing. "Talk to me," I said under my breath. Diddy ran a hand over his face. "You ever hear of someone getting out of here without serving their full sentence?" I frowned. "Like a deal?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "Not a deal. Not witness protection. Just gone. Like they never existed." My stomach twisted. "That's not how this works, man. You know that." He exhaled, staring off past the fence, past the watchtowers, past the walls that kept us locked in. "They take people." "Who?" A pause, a long one. Then, "The ones who know too much." The air around us felt heavy again. That same suffocating weight from the night before. Like something unseen was pressing down on us. I kept my voice steady. "And what do you know?" Diddy licked his lips, hesitated. "They think I know too much." My skin crawled. "About what?" He didn't answer, and that scared me more than anything. That night I lay awake again, listening, waiting. The prison was never truly silent, But something about the stillness felt unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. And then, just like the night before, footsteps. I turned my head slowly, barely breathing. They were softer this time, controlled, calculated. I could see the shadows moving just outside our cell. Not one, but two. Diddy didn't move. He was awake. I could tell by the way his body was tense, his breathing slow and measured. Another click. That same faint sound from the night before. I forced myself not to react. The footsteps lingered, hovered. Then finally they moved on. I let out a slow breath, but the fear didn't leave my body. I turned my head slightly toward Diddy. His eyes were open now, staring at the ceiling. "We're running out of time," he whispered. I swallowed hard. "What do they want?" A long silence stretched between us. Then, "To make sure I never talk." I felt my pulse in my throat. "And what happens if you do?" His jaw clenched. "Then they come for me." I took a deep breath. "You said they take people. Where do they go?" Diddy hesitated. "I don't know." I wanted to believe him, but the way he said it, it sounded like a lie. Morning came, and with it, another lie. Another cover-up. Another day of pretending like we weren't being watched by something more than just guards and inmates. Diddy moved slower than usual, like a man carrying too much weight on his back. I didn't push. I didn't ask. I just kept my head down, falling into the same routine as always. But something had changed. I could feel it. I caught a glimpse of one of the COs watching us. Not just a glance. A full, unwavering stare. I locked eyes with him, waiting for him to look away. He didn't. A chill ran down my spine. Diddy noticed. "It's starting," he murmured. I kept my eyes on the CO. "What is?" "The erasing." I turned to face him, my pulse hammering. "What do you mean?" Diddy exhaled. "They don't just take people. They erase them. Records, files, existence." He paused. "And when they do, nobody asks questions." My throat felt dry. "What are you saying?" Diddy gave me a look. "I'm saying if they decide I'm too much of a problem, by this time next week, it'll be like I was never here." I felt my stomach drop. "That's insane." "Is it?" I had no answer, no comeback, because deep down, I knew he was right. The prison wasn't just a place to hold criminals. It was something else, something worse. And whatever was happening behind the scenes, whoever those silent watchers were, they weren't just looking for Diddy anymore. They were looking at me too. And I didn't know how much time I had left before I disappeared right along with him. Chapter 4. The Erasing. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The weight of Diddy's words sat heavy in my chest. The erasing. The idea that people could just vanish from this place like they never existed. I had seen men get transferred, sent to solitary, even beaten so badly they didn't come back to Gen Pop for weeks. But this was something else, and I was starting to believe it. By morning, the prison felt different. Maybe it was just me, but the air was thick with something I couldn't name, like a storm before it breaks. Even the usual chaos of breakfast seemed muted. Guys who usually ran their mouths were quiet. The guards, who normally barked orders, barely spoke at all. I sat next to Diddy, staring at the tray of slop in front of me. I wasn't hungry. My stomach twisted just thinking about what he had said the night before. "They're watching," Diddy murmured, not looking up from his food. I didn't need to ask who. I already knew. I glanced around the room and caught one of the guards staring right at us. Same one from yesterday. The one who never looked away. His expression was blank, unreadable. But he was watching. I was sure of it. I leaned in. "What do they want from you?" Diddy's hand tightened around his spoon. "Not from me. From what I know." "About what?" He hesitated. I saw his jaw clench, his mind racing. Finally, he exhaled. "It's bigger than just me." My pulse kicked up. "What do you mean?" He set his spoon down, staring at the table like he was seeing something else. "You ever heard of kids disappearing?" I frowned. "What?" "Kids," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Going missing. Not just here, everywhere, like they never existed. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. What are you saying? He looked at me then, eyes dark, hollow. I think I know where they go. The rest of the day passed in a blur. My mind was stuck on Diddy's words. Kids going missing, like they never existed, and him knowing where they went. It sounded crazy, insane, but the way he said it, the fear in his voice, made it feel real. Yard time came, and with it, more eyes on us. The usual tension of prison life was still there, but now it felt like something else had settled over the place, something unseen, something patient. Diddy led me to the fence, same as before, but this time he didn't speak right away. He just stood there, staring past the barbed wire, past the walls like he was searching for something. They use islands, he finally said. I blinked. What? The kids, he murmured. They don't go to foster homes. They don't get adopted. They get sent away. My throat tightened. Sent where? Diddy's hands clenched into fists. Private places, places no one can find. A cold shiver ran down my spine. How do you know this? He hesitated. Because I helped hide them. My breath caught. What? He exhaled sharply. Not by choice. You think people like me, people with money, with connections, don't know what goes on behind closed doors? I heard things, saw things, and when I tried to back out, they made sure I couldn't. I took a step back. Jesus, Diddy. His eyes locked onto mine. This isn't just about me. It's about power, control. They take what they want, and when someone asks too many questions, they erase them, I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. Diddy nodded. And I'm next. That night I lay awake again, my mind spinning. If what Diddy was saying was true, if there were people in power, people with money, taking kids and hiding them away, then everything I thought I knew about this place, about the world outside, was a lie. And if they were willing to make people disappear to protect that secret, then I was in danger too. The footsteps came again, slow, deliberate. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just listened as they stopped outside our cell. Then the whisper. Not Diddy's, not mine. Something else. Something just beyond the door. Not yet. A shiver ran through me. The footsteps moved on. I turned my head, heart hammering. Diddy was awake, staring at the ceiling. It's getting closer, he murmured. I swallowed hard. What do we do? He finally turned to face me. We don't let them erase us. I nodded, but deep down I knew the truth. We were already running out of time. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Point. Sleep was a luxury I no longer had. Every night felt like a countdown, each passing second dragging me closer to some inevitable fate I couldn't escape. The walls of this prison weren't just holding me in anymore. They were closing in. Diddy's words had planted something inside me, something that festered. They use islands. I couldn't shake it, couldn't pretend like I hadn't heard it, because now every detail that once seemed like just another prison rumor was making too much sense. The disappearances, the unmarked visitors, the silence that followed. They were moving people like pieces on a board, and I was standing too close to the wrong one. By morning, I could feel the shift. The air in 1750 was thick, pressing down on me like a weight. The usual chatter was different, hushed, cautious. It was the kind of quiet that meant one thing: something was coming. I spotted Diddy across the cafeteria, sitting in the same spot as always, but this time, he wasn't eating. His tray was full, untouched, his eyes locked on the COs near the exit. Two of them, different from the ones I usually saw. They weren't talking, weren't laughing like the others. They were waiting. For what, I didn't know. But I had a damn good guess. I slid into the seat across from him, keeping my voice low. They watching you? Diddy didn't look at me. They're watching both of us now. A chill crawled up my spine. So what's the plan? He exhaled slowly. We don't have one yet. That's not good enough. Diddy finally looked at me, something dark behind his eyes. You think I don't know that? I clenched my jaw. He was right. There was no playbook for this. no way to outmaneuver something we barely understood. But waiting to be erased wasn't an option either. I leaned in. "Tell me everything." Diddy hesitated. Then finally he spoke. "I was at a party once, years ago, before all this. The kind where security keeps the wrong people out. The kind where secrets don't leave, except I heard one." I swallowed. "About the kids?" He nodded. "They don't just vanish. They're placed, sold, moved through places no one can track. And the worst part?" His voice dropped lower. "Most of the people involved don't think they're doing anything wrong." My stomach turned. How the hell is that possible? Diddy's gaze flicked to the COs again before he answered. "Because they believe the kids are being saved." I stared at him. "Saved?" He nodded. "That's how they justify it. To them, the world is full of broken homes, dangerous streets, and kids with no future. They think taking them somewhere safe is the right thing to do." I exhaled sharply. "And that somewhere is an island?" Diddy's jaw tightened. "One of many." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. The weight of what he was saying settled like lead in my gut. "And you got too close to the truth." "That's why they locked me up," Diddy said, his voice bitter. "Not the money, not the other shit. They didn't care about that. But when I started asking questions, when I started trying to pull away," he shook his head. "That's when they made sure I couldn't talk." "And now?" I asked. "Now they're finishing the job." Diddy nodded, his face grim. "And anyone too close to me goes with me." I sat back, my mind racing. There had to be a way out of this. There had to be a way to fight back. But when I looked around, all I saw were walls, guards, surveillance, a machine too big to escape from. And I knew, with a sick certainty, that if I didn't find a way soon, I'd be the next to disappear. That night, the footsteps came again. Slow, deliberate. I forced myself to stay still, listening as they stopped outside our cell. A shadow passed under the door, blocking the faint glow of the hallway lights. Then the whisper, low, sharp. "Tomorrow." A shiver ran through me. I turned my head, meeting Diddy's gaze in the dark. His voice was barely audible. "They're making their move." I swallowed hard. "Then so are we." Chapter 6. The Extraction. I didn't sleep, again. But this time it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was resolve. Tomorrow. That was the word whispered outside our cell. A warning. A deadline. Or maybe a death sentence. Either way, I wasn't waiting around to find out. Neither was Diddy. "We make our move at lockdown," he murmured in the dark. "That's our only window." It was insane. We were in a federal detention center. Cameras watching every corner. Guards stationed like sentries. If we got caught, the best we could hope for was solitary. The worst? Well, the worst was exactly what we were trying to avoid. I took a deep breath. "What's the plan?" Diddy hesitated. "It's not a plan, it's a gamble." I wasn't surprised, but I needed to hear it anyway. "The laundry chute," he finally said. "They send down the sheets before midnight. We get inside, drop to the basement. From there, we follow the air ducts to maintenance. If we're lucky, we get through before the next shift change." I stared at him. "And if we're not lucky?" His face was grim. "Then we don't leave this place alive." We played normal the next morning. Ate breakfast like we weren't about to attempt the impossible. Walked the yard like we weren't watching every movement around us. The tension was suffocating, but we couldn't let it show. If they suspected anything, we'd be done before we even started. The COs were watching. I could feel it. Every time I moved, I caught a set of eyes lingering too long. The guard from before, the one who always seemed to be tracking us, stood near the entrance to the yard, unmoving, expression blank, waiting. I turned to Diddy. "They know something." He nodded. "Doesn't change what we have to do." We walked back to the block, my pulse pounding in my ears. Every second felt stretched, like time itself was working against us. But finally, the lockdown buzzer sounded. Showtime. We moved the second the last guard passed by our cell. Diddy worked fast, pulling back the vent that covered the chute. I climbed in first, the metal freezing against my skin. Then came the drop. Fast, jarring, ending with me hitting a pile of damp, reeking sheets at the bottom. Diddy landed next to me a second later. I barely had time to breathe before he was moving again. We scrambled through the narrow passage, crawling through dust and grime, the air thick with the scent of mildew and bleach. Every sound felt deafening. Every movement felt like a mistake waiting to happen. Then footsteps. We froze. A voice. Low. Muted. Someone talking to a radio. I held my breath. The air was thin, stifling. Then silence. A door creaked open, then shut. Diddy nudged me forward. We crawled deeper into the darkness. The maintenance room was empty when we slipped through the vent. I had no idea how much time we had. Seconds? Minutes? Diddy moved straight to the supply closet, rifling through shelves. We need a uniform. I grabbed the first thing I saw, a set of janitor's overalls. Diddy did the same. We changed fast, shoving our prison clothes deep into the shelves. It wouldn't hold forever, but it didn't have to. We just needed to get past the next checkpoint. Then we'd be outside. The hallway beyond maintenance was deserted. No guards, no cameras. Just a single reinforced door leading to the loading dock. Diddy swiped a mop bucket as we walked, keeping our pace steady. 2 workers passed us but didn't spare a glance. We were just another part of the background. For once, the system's indifference worked in our favor. Then, the checkpoint. A lone guard stood by the door, flipping through a clipboard. He barely looked up as we approached. "Trash run," Diddy muttered, pushing the mop bucket forward. The guard grunted. "New guys?" Diddy nodded. "Yeah." The guard eyed us, his gaze lingering a second too long. My stomach clenched. Then finally he stepped aside. "Hurry up, next shift's coming in." We didn't wait to be told twice. The night air hit like a shock to the system. Cold. Real. For the first time in months, I felt something other than steel and concrete around me. Freedom. But we weren't safe yet. Diddy moved fast, leading us between the loading docks. "There's a car waiting." I didn't ask how. I didn't need to know. We sprinted across the lot, every second stretching longer than it should. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. Then, headlights. The car screeched to a stop. The door flew open. "Get in!" We dove inside, the tires squealing as we sped off. As the prison shrank in the distance, I dared to breathe. But I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Chapter 7, Into the Shadows. The car sped down the highway, the city lights blurring into streaks of yellow and white. Diddy sat in the passenger seat, his eyes scanning the road ahead, while I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting sirens to explode behind us. But there was nothing. Just the low hum of the engine and the weight of what we'd just done. I turned to the driver, a man in his late 40s, skin weathered like someone who had spent too many years on the run. "Who are you?" He didn't look at me, his hand steady on the wheel. "Call me Reggie." I shot Diddy a look, but he was already one step ahead. "He's clean," Diddy said. "Knows the game." Reggie chuckled, finally sparing me a glance through the rearview mirror. "I know a lot more than that." I wasn't in the mood for games. "Where are we going?" Reggie's smile faded. "Someplace safe. For now." I didn't like how that sounded. And after, "for now," Diddy exhaled sharply. "After that, we find out how deep this goes." The safe house wasn't what I expected. No rundown shack in the middle of nowhere. No abandoned warehouse. It was an upscale loft, high enough to keep eyes on the streets below, but low-key enough not to attract attention. The inside was sparse, just a couch, a few chairs, a table, and a single laptop resting on the counter. Reggie locked the door behind us. "Phones." I hesitated. "Why?" "Because if they're tracking you, they're tracking your phone." I didn't argue. I tossed mine onto the counter, and Diddy did the same. Reggie swept them into a metal case, shutting it with a heavy clunk. "No signals, get in or out now," he said. "You're ghosts." Diddy dropped onto the couch, rubbing his temples. "We need to start looking." I frowned. "For what?" He met my eyes. "The island." Reggie opened the laptop and started typing, his fingers moving faster than I could follow. "Whatever you think you know, double it. These people don't just disappear kids. They rewrite history." I leaned over his shoulder. Then how do we find them? Reggie's fingers paused on the keyboard. We don't, Diddy set up. What? We don't find them. We make them come to us. I shook my head. That's suicide. Reggie smirked. Not if we do it right. He turned the laptop to face us. On the screen was an encrypted forum, one I'd never seen before. The language was coded, full of references that didn't make sense, but the meaning was clear. People were talking, and they were looking for something. What is this? I asked. Reggie leaned back. A marketplace. Diddy's jaw tightened. For kids? Reggie nodded. And other things. But yeah, if you want to move people without a trace, this is where you go. My stomach turned. And you know this how? Reggie's face darkened. Because I used to help shut these places down, before the people running them shut me down first. A beat of silence passed. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. The look in his eyes told me enough. Diddy exhaled. So how do we use it? Reggie's fingers flew over the keys again. We bait them. We pretend to be buyers. Drop the right words in the right places. And then what? I asked. Reggie's smile was cold. Then we make them think we're worth talking to. The next 24 hours were a blur of code, fake identities, and messages sent into the void. It was a delicate dance. Too eager, and they'd sniff us out. Too vague, and they'd ignore us. Diddy stayed quiet most of the time, his mind elsewhere. I knew what he was thinking. If we got a name, a location, any piece of the puzzle, we still had no real power, no backup, no leverage. But we had to try. Then finally we got a hit. A single reply, short, director. Meet me. My throat went dry. It worked. Diddy stood, reading over my shoulder. Where? I clicked the message. A location loaded, a bar, south side of the city. Tonight. Reggie shut the laptop. You sure you want to do this? Diddy's eyes were sharp, focused. We don't have a choice. Neither did I. We arrived just after midnight. The bar was nearly empty, the kind of place that didn't ask questions. A single man sat in the farthest booth, his face half hidden under the shadow of a low-hanging light. Reggie stayed outside, keeping watch. Diddy and I walked in, sliding into the booth across from the man. He studied us, his gaze lingering on Diddy. Then he smirked. Didn't expect to see you out of a cage. Diddy didn't blink. You know who I am? The man nodded. I know a lot of things. I leaned forward. Then you know why we're here. The man exhaled, taking a slow sip from his glass. Then he set it down, leaning in. His voice was low, even. You're looking for something that doesn't exist. Diddy's voice was ice. It exists. The man smirked. Yeah, it does. A long pause, and then he slid something across the table. A single worn photo. An island, palm trees, a mansion barely visible through the foliage. And on the shore, figures, small, too small. Children. My blood ran cold. Diddy's hands clenched into fists. The man's voice was barely a whisper. You don't walk away from this. I met his eyes, my heart pounding. Neither do they. He studied me for a moment. Then he smiled. We'll see. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The photo lay between us like a live wire, humming with the weight of what it meant. Diddy stared at it, his face carved from stone, while I felt my pulse thundering in my ears. The man across from us, our nameless contact, smirked like he already knew what was coming next. You can't unsee it now, he said, voice slick with amusement. So what's the plan? You gonna walk away, or you gonna make a move? Diddy exhaled slowly. We're going to that island. The man chuckled, shaking his head. That's rich. You think you can just fly in, guns blazing, and snatch them up? You don't even know who you're up against. I leaned in, lowering my voice. Then tell us. He eyed me for a long moment before sighing. Look, I like you two. You got guts, I'll give you that. But you're biting off something too big to chew. This isn't just some pervert with a yacht. This is an operation, one with money, power, and friends in every corner of the world. Diddy's eyes didn't waver. Names, locations, anything you've got. The man hesitated, then reached into his jacket. I tensed, ready to react, but he only pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and slid it across the table. There's a warehouse, South Docks. They move shipments through there. If you're serious, start there. I picked up the paper, scanning the address. Why help us? His smirk faded. Because I don't like what they do either, but I like staying alive more. He stood, tossing a few bills on the table. Good luck, gentlemen. You'll need it. Then he was gone. Reggie was waiting outside, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. That go how you wanted? Diddy climbed into the car, rubbing his temples. We got a lead. Reggie sighed, sliding into the driver's seat. Then I hope you're ready for what comes next. The warehouse looked like nothing special from the outside. Just another rusting husk on the docks, one of a dozen others. But the second we pulled up, I knew something was off. The air felt wrong, like the space itself was holding a secret too big to keep. We parked a block away and moved in on foot, staying low. Reggie had managed to get us a few weapons. Nothing fancy, just a couple of handguns and a knife strapped to my ankle. It wasn't much, but it was something. Diddy crouched behind a stack of crates, peering through the gaps. Guards! I followed his line of sight. 2 men patrolled the entrance, their posture too rigid to be casual security. These weren't rent-a-cops. These were trained. Reggie exhaled. They're armed. I swallowed hard. So what's the move? Diddy checked his watch. Wait for the shift change. Less eyes, less risk. Reggie tapped his temple. And more time for them to realize we're here. A long silence stretched between us before Diddy made the call. We go now. We moved like shadows, sticking close to the walls, avoiding open spaces. Reggie took out the first guard with terrifying efficiency. One quick chokehold, a muffled struggle, and the man went limp. I barely had time to process it before Diddy and I were dragging him into the shadows. The second guard never saw us coming. Diddy was on him before he could react, slamming him into the wall and knocking him out cold. Inside, now! The door creaked open, revealing a cavernous space filled with shipping containers stacked high. The air smelled like oil and seawater, but underneath it, something else, something foul. We moved cautiously, weaving through the metal corridors. Then somewhere in the distance, a sound, a voice, small, a child. Diddy stiffened, his fists clenching. We're close! We followed the sound, each step measured, each breath held. Then we found it, a single container, padlocked shut. Reggie moved fast, pulling out a crowbar from his pack, wedging it into the lock. Hurry, I urged, my pulse spiking. With a grunt, Reggie pried it open. The door creaked, swinging outward. And inside dashed a group of children. Dirty, terrified, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Some were barely 5. Others were teenagers, their expressions hollow. One of the older ones stepped forward, a girl with tangled hair and bruises on her arms. Who are you? Diddy knelt, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. We're getting you out. The girl hesitated. They said no one was coming. I felt my throat tighten. They were wrong. A noise behind us, footsteps. Fast, heavy. Reggie cursed. Move! Move! Diddy scooped up one of the smaller kids while I grabbed the girl's hand. Come on! The moment we stepped out, gunfire exploded around us. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off metal. I ducked, shielding the girl as we ran for cover. Reggie! I shouted. He was already ahead of us, laying down fire. Keep moving! Diddy was ahead, shoving kids toward the exit, his face a mask of fury. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear them closing in. The warehouse doors loomed ahead. Freedom, a chance. Then something hit me, a sharp, burning pain in my side. I stumbled, my vision blurring. Diddy grabbed me before I could fall. Not now, keep going. I gritted my teeth, forcing my legs to move. The world spun, but I focused on one thing, the children. They were almost out, almost safe. Then finally the night air hit us. The car was waiting. Reggie threw open the doors, shoving kids inside. I collapsed into the back seat, my breath coming in ragged gas. Diddy slammed the door shut behind us. Go, go, go! Reggie peeled out, tires screeching against pavement. I pressed a hand to my wound, feeling the warmth of my own blood. Did we get them all? Diddy turned, counting heads. Then he exhaled, a slow, heavy sound. Yeah, we got them. I let my head fall back against the seat, my vision tunneling. But before I blacked out, I heard Diddy's voice, sharp with determination. This isn't over.